Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to have the opportunity to rise for a few moments tonight and talk a little more about the Department of Fisheries and Oceans policy on owner-operator fleet separation. Part of and my colleague, the member from St. John's East, was up on his feet a moment ago raising some of the issues that we've had, some of the concerns we've had about where the government is going. He referred to the report that the minister had put out that talked about modernizing the fishery and asked for people to have input. And part of the concern that folks in the industry, from where I come from, had with this was that there was no mention whatsoever in the report. There was nothing in the report about the owner-operator fleet separation policy. It was silent, in fact, and some people were, in fact, taken aback by this. And it was only after people began to talk with one another, that some of the sectors talked with one another, they recognized what seemed to be going on here, and they forced the government actually to extend their consultation period by at least, I think it was another week, so that they would have the opportunity to put in some comments. And people are still looking for, people in the industry have said to me that they want the government to back off making any decision on the owner-operator fleet separation policy until there has been some very clear exchange, some very clear consultation on the policy itself before they move forward. And I just want to say a couple of things and why I believe that this policy is so important. Mr. Speaker, we have a situation where the inshore, predominated by the owner-operator fleet separation policy, is the largest and most productive sector in the fishery in this country, in the fish harvesting industry, that as they've moved over the past 20 years from predominantly groundfish based to more shellfish based, and the higher landing values, they have become, the inshore fishery has become by far the most value laden and the most successful fishery that is in this country. And the concern that many of us have, they're supporting over 1,000 communities throughout Atlantic Canada and Quebec, Mr. Speaker, and many of us on this side and throughout that region are concerned that this move to get rid of the policy will result, as it did in the West Coast, in greater concentration, not only in ownership, but also in control of the fishery and the people that work on those vessels. That it will be concentrated in larger centres, and that it will be concentrated in the hands of people that have absolutely no connection with the fishery in terms of harvesting methods, in terms of conservation, and in terms of how the industry moves forward from here on in. So, that's the issue, and that's why I want to ask the parliamentary secretary if he will not agree that the department has to back off, engage in an open and transparent dialogue with the industry before they move in this further direction to change the owner-operator fleet separation policy.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Oceans and Fisheries.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague, began with something of a conspiracy theory, and that's just not the case here. Now he ended by saying that the Atlantic fishery is just doing so well, and in some cases it is, but in some cases it isn't. And I think he can think of some fisheries where fishermen are not making a living. And our commitment as a government is to improving Canada's fishing industry. We think that the industry can do better in terms of providing a livelihood for Canadians and contributing to the Canadian economy. And it was for those reasons that we went out to speak with Canadians with an open mind to hear their views on what works and what doesn't, because we certainly heard about some things that don't work. We wanted to hear directly from those who make a living in this business about what they need, not only to survive, as I said earlier, but also to thrive in an increasingly competitive and global marketplace. So the purpose of the process that was followed in this national engagement process was really threefold. We wanted, first of all, to inform stakeholders of recently announced improvements to the fisheries management regime. These changes, such as longer-term management plans and multi-year science advice, it was important that fishermen know that this was a transition we were making, and we think will provide the industry greater stability and better enable them to make long-term business decisions. Now, secondly, part of this consultation included getting feedback and input on new draft policies and tools that aim to improve the sustainability of the resource. The government recognizes the sustainability of the resource is critical to the economic prosperity of the industry. If you don't have any fish, it doesn't matter if you have the right policies. And sometimes it's easy to forget that. For example, a modern fisheries management approach needs to address issues around bycatch, and in fact there was some discussions about that. And implementing policies like these is not only good for the resource, but it's also good for the industry in that it helps them prove to retailers and consumers that their product was harvested in a sustainable way. And thirdly, and we wanted to hear people's thoughts on how the complex web of rules currently governing fisheries could be streamlined. In short, we asked the question, what do you need to be able to compete on a global scale? Again, there were no preconditions on what could be suggested. We wanted to hear all views. When someone suggested that we change a specific policy, our reaction was why, not sorry, we can't consider that. In examining an issue as complex as Canada's fisheries management regime, you cannot arbitrarily exclude key elements in your analysis. You have to look at the whole system and all of its rules, policies, practices, management measures, and regulations, and you have to look at how each of those parts interacts with the others. Then you have to ask, is this system achieving the goals that we think it should? Is the system providing Canadians with a sustainable resource and improving economic prosperity? And those are the questions we have been asking and to which we have been receiving response. In general, the response to this process was encouraging. It yielded thousands of responses from people, including independent harvesters, processors, Aboriginal groups, NGOs, academics, and, in fact, the broader public, some even from outside the country. All of these views and opinions need to be considered if we are to examine fisheries as a whole. We're now, as I've said, in the process of reviewing and analyzing all of the submissions we received, and this input will help guide the Minister and his officials as we move forward to work out to continually improve fisheries management in Canada.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Parliamentary Secretary mentioned the fact that not everybody in this sector is making a living. And I will recognize the fact that there have been extraordinary stresses and strains on individual fishers in this sector, but it's important to recognize that this is the most productive and successful sector, the owner-operator sector, within the fish harvesting industry in this country. And the problem that some of the fishers have had is as a result, directly as a result, of the management practices and policies of the Minister's Department. That's where some of the issues. And the answer to that is not to get rid of all these small owner-operator fishers that make sure that communities are going to survive throughout our region, and to concentrate the value in the hands of fewer people. That's not the answer. Let's have a responsible and reasonable discussion about this and try to deal with some of the problems, not give up on it.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, in fact, there are some prosperous, well-managed fisheries on the West Coast as well that operate by a different set of policies, and so on the East Coast, the minister, as I said, went out there to say, what works, what doesn't work. Both speakers so far have indicated that many fishermen and fishermen's groups have given us input that the owner-operator policies and fleet separation are important. We're certainly aware of their feelings on that, and are taking that into consideration as we try to keep our eye on the goal, which is productive fisheries, sustainable fisheries that provide a living for people, provide prosperity for communities, and are going to be there for future generations as well.